For a long, long time, women have been a big part of the Catholic Church. They have taught, prayed, served, and even died for their faith. But when it comes to leadership, they've often been left in the shadows. The question has always been there. Why can't women lead more in the church? Why can't they be priests, bishops, or even help make big decisions at the Vatican? For years, the answer was silence. Some said, it's tradition. Others said, it's just the way things are. But now, something is changing. A quiet voice is speaking up, and that voice belongs to Pope Francis. Since becoming Pope, Francis has surprised many people. He talks a lot about mercy, justice, and listening, especially listening to women. He's asked big questions that no one at the top has asked in a long time. What if women had more say in the church? What if their voices were part of shaping the future of faith? This isn't just about one man in white robes. It's about millions of women across the world. Women who love the church, but also wonder if the church truly sees them. Today we take a closer look at the silence, at the questions, and at the man who may finally be ready to listen. Let's go back to the very beginning. In the early days of Christianity, women were there, right in the heart of it. They weren't just in the background. They led, they taught, and they cared for others. There were women called deaconesses. They helped the sick, baptized new believers, and cared for women in the church. Some women were known as saints. Others became martyrs, giving up their lives rather than giving up their faith. There's even a woman named Phoebe in the Bible. St. Paul called her a deacon, and Mary Magdalene, she was the first to see Jesus after he rose from the dead. He told her to go and tell the others. She was the first witness of the resurrection. In those early years, women had important roles. They were trusted, respected, and active. But slowly, that changed. As the church grew, it became more organized and more controlled by men. By the time of the Middle Ages, women were still part of the church, but mostly as nuns or caretakers. They prayed, they taught, they served, but they no longer had a voice in leadership. Rules became stricter. Women couldn't become priests. They couldn't preach. They couldn't help make decisions about church laws, and those limits stayed in place for hundreds of years. Even today, in most Catholic churches, women can't be ordained as priests. They often do important work, but they rarely get to lead. For a long time, the Vatican, the central government of the Catholic Church, stood firm on these rules. Previous popes like John Paul II and Benedict XVI respected women deeply. They praised women as mothers, teachers, and keepers of faith. John Paul II once said that women bring something special to the church, something gentle, wise, and powerful. He even wrote a letter called Letter to Women, thanking women for their role in families and in faith. But when it came to leadership or ordination, his answer was clear: no. He said the church has no authority to let women become priests because Jesus only chose men to be his apostles. Pope Benedict XVI agreed. He also said that women are important, but their role is different from men. He believed that tradition and scripture gave clear guidance. So for many years, even as the world changed, even as women became leaders in politics, business, and education, the church stayed the same. The message was always the same: we love women, but they cannot lead the church in the same way as men. Then came a new pope. In 2013, Pope Francis was elected. He was a surprise choice. He came from Argentina, not Europe. He lived simply, rode the bus, and spoke from the heart. From the beginning, Pope Francis sounded different. He talked about mercy, humility, and serving the poor. He wasn't afraid to say, "We have made mistakes." And when it came to women in the church, he said something that made people stop and listen. He said, "The church cannot be herself without the woman and her role." He admitted that the church had not done enough to include women's voices. He even said, "We must reflect more deeply on the role of women in the church." This wasn't just about giving nice speeches. It was about listening, really listening, to what women were saying. Francis didn't change church law overnight, but his tone was different. He wasn't closing the door. He was asking questions that hadn't been asked in a long time. And for many women, that alone felt like the beginning of something new. Pope Francis didn't just talk. He started to take real steps. He set up special groups, called commissions, to study women's roles in the church. One of these commissions looked into the history of female deacons. He wanted to know, did the early church really have women deacons? And if so, could we bring that back today? This was the first time a pope had seriously asked that question in modern times. He also began appointing women to roles in the Vatican, positions that had always been held by men. He named women as undersecretaries, council members, and even as part of the office that helps choose new bishops. These are not small roles. They help shape the future of the church. In one of his most powerful statements, Francis said, "We must create more space for women's voices to be heard." He said that women must be part of decision-making, not just helpers or observers. He said the church must not be afraid of strong women. Of course, not everyone agrees with him. Some people think he's gone too far. Others say he hasn't gone far enough. But one thing is clear. Pope Francis has opened a door, and he has invited women to come in and speak. This is why many say the silence is finally breaking. Not because every answer is clear yet, but because someone at the top is finally asking the right questions. And for many, that gives hope. For so long, the Vatican was a place of suits, collars, and mostly male voices. But in recent years, something new has happened. Women are speaking, and they're finally being heard. Let's meet some of these voices. Sister Nathalie Bécard made history when she was appointed as the first woman to vote in a synod of bishops. She's calm, thoughtful, and full of grace. She once said, "This is not about power. This is about participation. It's about walking together." Then there's Phyllis Zagano, a respected theologian who has written about women deacons for years. She was invited by Pope Francis to join the commission studying women in the early church. In her words, "Francis gave us something we hadn't had before, space to be taken seriously." Valentina Alazraki, a veteran Catholic journalist, sat across from popes for decades. But she said Francis listens differently. He asks questions. He's not afraid of the answers. And ordinary nuns and laywomen, those who work quietly in parishes, schools, and missions, have felt a shift too. One nun from Kenya said, "Before, our voices were small. Now we feel seen. Even if nothing has changed fully, we are part of the conversation." These voices aren't just speaking. They're helping shape the future of the church. And Pope Francis? He's the one who opened the door and invited them in. Of course, not everyone is happy with these changes. Some traditionalists are deeply concerned. They believe the church is built on ancient truth that should not be changed. They say Jesus chose 12 men to be apostles. That's the model. We can't rewrite history to fit modern ideas. They fear that too much change could break apart something sacred. To them, Pope Francis is walking a dangerous line. But others, progressives, say he hasn't gone far enough. They respect him, but they ask, why only symbolic change? Why not real, structural change? They point out that women still can't become priests. They can't lead dioceses. They can't vote in many important church decisions. To these critics, what's happening now feels like a small drop of water in a very dry desert. This creates tension between holding on to tradition and reaching for something new, between the fear of moving too fast and the pain of waiting too long. It's not easy. Some say it feels like the church is standing in two worlds, one foot in the past, the other in the future. But one thing is clear: the conversation has begun. And once voices rise, it's hard to silence them again. So what happens next? Some say the next big step could be female deacons. The early church had them. Why not now? Many hope Pope Francis will say yes before his time as Pope ends. Others dream bigger. Could women ever become priests? Right now, the church says no. But history shows that what seems impossible today may not be tomorrow. And it's not just about titles or robes. It's about dignity. It's about giving women the chance to lead, to serve, and to shape the church from the inside. If female deacons were allowed, they could preach, baptize, and care for communities in new ways. This would be especially powerful in places where priests are few, like parts of Africa, Asia, and Latin America, where women often keep the faith alive day after day. It could also inspire young women. Right now, many Catholic girls love their faith, but feel there's no place for them at the table of leadership. Giving them a voice could give the church a new kind of strength. And beyond roles and titles, something deeper is happening. A global shift. Catholic women around the world are watching, waiting, and praying. Because when one woman's voice is heard in Rome, millions of women around the world feel heard too. Let's step back. The Catholic Church is more than 2,000 years old, and for most of that time, women were kept on the outside of leadership. But now, something has changed. Not everything, but something. Pope Francis didn't break the system, he didn't rewrite the rules, but he did break the silence. He asked the hard questions. He gave women a seat at the table. He said out loud what many had whispered for generations, that women matter, that their gifts are needed, that the church is not whole without them. Change is slow, but for the first time in centuries, that change is being discussed openly from the top. And when the church listens to its daughters, the whole world starts to listen too. Now it's your turn. What do you think about Pope Francis and women in the church? Do you think change is coming? Should it come faster? Or should things stay the same? We want to hear your voice. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe this conversation matters, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to join more powerful discussions on faith, history, and change. Because this isn't just about the church, it's about all of us.